And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, up first for flying weather. Thursday morning, have some IFR here along the Brooks Range and a bigger area of IFR here out over the Bering Sea, but staying off the coast here. That extends down to the eastern Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula, marginal for Kodiak Island, marginal VFR across the Gulf of Alaska, and also looking at a couple of spots of IFR here over the mountains just north of Fairbanks, or the Tanana Valley actually, and also along the eastern Alaska Range. Marginal VFR here, mostly central and southern southeast coast. For the afternoon, marginal VFR in areas here over the central and northern panhandle. IFR there just off the eastern North Gulf Coast. Looking for some lower conditions to spread into Prince William Sound. Otherwise, to the west and north, staying VFR. That also extends out to the west here to Nunivak Island and beyond, and then northward there into the Chukchi Sea. IFR, Central Bering Sea, kind of splits up a little bit with one branch into the Alaska Peninsula and another one down across Atka Island. Then for Friday morning, IFR here, still out over the Central Bering Sea down to the Central Aleutians, and then some areas of IFR for the Fox Islands into the Alaska Peninsula. Then possible IFR, eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, western Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast, maybe even the northern panhandle there up around Glacier Bay toward Haines, with much better conditions down to the south. Then for the afternoon, areas of marginal VFR along the coastal areas of the panhandle here, but looking at lower conditions, kind of an increase in the IFR from the morning hours there for Lincoln Isle Glacier Bay area. Band of IFR possible here for the North Gulf Coast and western Prince William Sound. And marginal VFR, western Alaska Range. Pretty good VFR though, holding over the interior. And for the Bering Sea, a lot less in the way of IFR now, just a lot of marginal conditions there. St. Matthew Island down into the Aleutians, but the next front way out there to the west pushing another band of IFR almost into Shimmy and Attu. For the passes tomorrow, Anatuvik and Adigan, occasional marginal VFR, especially in the morning hours for both those passes. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. VFR also for rainy and windy. And Isabel as well, Mentesta, looking at some lower conditions there. Marginal VFR, especially on the northern entrances. Possible IFR up that way too. And then for Tanita back to VFR. Portage, VFR, and Chilkoot and White, mostly VFR. Could be some marginal VFR in the northern approach of both of those passes. But for the freezing levels here, kind of some warm air sliding on up into the Bering Strait area, about 2,000 feet there. Otherwise, 2,000 feet here over the eastern Aleutians to just west of the Pribilofs, and then at the surface, cutting across Bristol Bay and just off the North Gulf Coast, and then down along the coast of the Panhandle. So moving to icing, not a lot going on icing-wise. Mostly icing here off the coast, but some of that could slip up toward the southern Kenai Peninsula, Montague Island area there. And then also an icing, elevated threat of some icing here for the eastern interior there from about the eastern Alaska Range northward to a certain extent, but staying south of Eagle. And then for the jet stream here, got this cold upper low pulling westward and winds blowing around that out of the east, becoming north through the western part of the state and then back around to the west here, just off the North Gulf Coast, in across the Panhandle from the west-southwest at about anywhere from 55 to 70 knots. And then out to the west there, another band of stronger winds, but only 60 to 65 knots over the western Aleutians. 9,000 feet here. Pretty good winds up over the northern interior here. You can see out of the east, 55 to 65 knots, turn north at about 35 knots there, Norton Sound. Really diminished, not much wind out over the Bering Sea here, and the Aleutians especially. Pretty light by comparison. Light over southern Alaska here, low pressure. Southwestern Susitna Valley, kind of hard to place that low center exactly, but a weak low here, and then light winds all the way down the southeast coast. Then at 3,000 feet, this low here in the southern Gulf of Alaska, and there's a band of 45 knot easterlies there along and just off the North Gulf Coast, kind of blowing right into Prince William Sound. Much stronger winds here up along the Arctic coast up to 55 knots, and then anywhere from 45 to 55 knots here in another band just south of the Brooks Range, and about 40 knots over the lower Yukon River Valley. Otherwise, light winds out here over the Bering Sea. Next storm way out there to the west, starting to push some winds, but staying west of even Chimney too. So turbulence-wise, tomorrow, biggest area of seeing some moderate turbulence, pretty bumpy conditions through the north central interior up toward the Brooks Range there. And then also possibly here for the North Gulf Coast in areas there with mechanical light to isolated moderate turbulence here across the all of the North Gulf Coast into the northern panhandle.